Today's episode is a conversation I've been looking forward to for a long time. My guest is Ivan Pauls, Chief Creative Officer at What Three Words, and one of the most original thinkers I've met when it comes to creativity, systems, and culture. He's led global campaigns at Ogilvy and Adam and Eve DDB and was part of the team behind that Diamond Shreddies campaign, the now legendary cereal campaign that turned a square 45 degrees and landed in TED Talks and textbooks. But this episode isn't about advertising. It's about how creativity actually works, not just in briefings or brainstorms, but across teams, systems, decisions, and daily operations. Ivan believes creativity isn't a job title, it's a decision making system and a cultural operating layer. At What Three Words, he's helped build a company where story drives alignment, feedback is infrastructure, and creative thinking isn't isolated, it's embedded. We talk about why the word creative can hold people back, how friction sharpens originality, and what it takes to design an environment where bold ideas don't just survive, they scale. So, if you're thinking about how to make your team, your brand, or your business more original, this episode has something for you. Let's get into it. All right, Ivan Poles, welcome to the Creative Ops Podcast.
Thanks, Nish. Good to be here.
I've been looking forward to this. Today, we might touch a bit on operations, but we're really going to be talking about creativity. As you and I had a conversation, I think it was about a month or two ago, and I was just really taken by your perspective on creativity. And it just so happens, because I'm convinced that there is an algorithm running through all of human history. I've had a whole bunch of conversations since then with people going, creativity needs to be not just something that people do off in a corner. It needs to be part of an organization's DNA, its ethos, its operating system. But before we get to all that, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what do you do and why do you do what you do?
Well, currently I'm the Chief Creative Officer at a company called What Three Words, which is a tech company. And what we've done is split the world into 3 meter squares and given each one a 3-word address. So it's an address system for the world, which is an odd place to be a creative director. Before that, I started my consultancy with the idea of helping businesses kind of harness their own creativity, and not just at a department level, but at a kind of full business level. And before that, I was a global creative director at Adam and Eve DDB and at Ogilvy. So I was running campaigns for Dove Man Plus Care, Unilever, Philips, Shavers, big global projects, which was really like an amazing place to learn how the big business works, but also to see where it fails on an ongoing basis. So my background is art direction, creative direction. I mean, back in the beginning, I wanted to be a cartoonist, but that didn't quite take off.
Why did you want to be a cartoonist?
Because I love to draw. I wanted to be a comic book artist and do graphic novels and make people laugh. And my imagination runs riot. So that's where it all started from.
Do you still cartoon and do graphics work in your spare time?
It mostly comes out as birthday cards, Christmas cards,
Okay.
and thank you cards.
All right. Is there a weird sense of humor that sort of runs through it as well?
Yeah, there is actually, and
Okay. Awesome.
it can be questionable. The older I get, the funnier the dog drawings get. So.
Well, on my bucket list now is to get on your birthday card list because I would love to see one of those. And do I then take it you were formally trained, like in terms of education, in a creative pursuit?
Yeah, so wanting to be a comic book artist, I did a graphic novel when I got out of high school, and then quickly realized that there was no market for that in Johannesburg, which is where I'm from. Also, I didn't know anything, so I went to study graphic design, where I really got into the process of it, the craft of designing a logo, and we used to like paint the logos or silk screening box graphics, and just like proper Bauhaus training across a big range of creative disciplines. And when I was still at school doing this, I got hired to be the first employee at a startup ad agency in Johannesburg.
Oh, okay.
And I remember I was very idealistic and way more opinionated than I am now, which is still quite opinionated. But uh, and I brought my portfolio to this guy, to Jerry, and he goes, "Oh, I'd like you to work for me." And I was like, "Well, I don't really want to work in advertising. I want to I want to be a graphic designer. Like purist." He was like, "It's all kind of the same." I was like, "Well, it's a job, so I'll try it out." And it was like I worked with the right people who just let me try things. And there was also no one else in a startup agency to do the work. We didn't have a studio to hand off the work to. It was you came up with the idea, you sold it to the client, you went to the shoot, did the retouching, got a print ready, saw it in the newspaper. So it was I got to like really try everything and learn by making.
What did Jerry mean by it's all the same? It's all storytelling? Because advertising often sort of gets a bad knock, right? Like of,
Yeah,
oh, you're in advertising, you're like spinning things and
I think what he meant was it's about communicating an idea. Like you're
yeah.
trying to tell a story, and so the why and the what doesn't really change very much. It's just really the format that the kind of how you make it, I suppose. So graphic design, is I suppose more weirdly enough, I find it slightly more neutral, in terms of how it's not pushy and it's not trying to sell something. Whereas in advertising land, it's much more commodified and like you bang through stuff really quickly because there's always a new campaign to come. But
Es-
yeah,
especially these days where the algorithms are
I mean,
sort of there to be served.
absolutely. Now you feed the machine.
Right.
But even 20 years ago, what you were doing is uh, there was a marketing budget. It had to bring a certain amount of users or buyers to a business, and so you always had to be doing campaigns. I worked on satellite TV in South Africa at a service called DSTV. So it was new TV shows, new movies, new sports, giant billboards, TV, print ads, TV ads, and you worked on a cycle of like 3 weeks. So it's not new. It's like the volume of work that businesses have to create isn't new. But I think what I took from that was, I mean, I did logo design. I built websites. I did UX, like early UX and interface design. I even did like label design for ciders, alcoholic beverages.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technique, and I'm very good at that. That's the one thing that drawing gave me was the confidence to like do stuff with my hands.
I think that's really important. And I think, as time goes on, that hands on the pencil or hands on the keyboard craft has sort of been lost, but especially the hands on the pencil craft has been lost. And
Yeah,
I don't know if, I don't know, we can't tell because we can't do an A B test of the entire universe yet. So I don't know if it's been a benefit or not.
I'm not so worried. I'm not really worried about pencils or stylus. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's an issue. What I'm noticing is that the the kind of fundamental, the bedrock skills of let's say composition. So an image has to be composed, and there's a variety of ways of getting the eye to move across a page. When you don't understand that structure, when you can't look at a painting or a photograph and understand why it works, when you just hit the button or you just kind of like, if you hit the AI generate button, for instance, which is, I think, can you tell why that image works or does not work? And then how do you manipulate that composition in order to achieve a goal? And that's the thing I'm noticing we're missing, is that it's become so easy to generate something that looks good that you don't understand why it works or how to make it better. It's just shiny.
So let's put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that because we're definitely going to talk about AI and how it relates to today's meta topic, which is what is creativity? And
Mm.
before I ask you to dive into that, the reason, you know, for those that listen to the podcast or watch it now on YouTube, we don't usually spend this much time learning about somebody's background here. And I wanted to do that with you today because you do have that background of craft. And you've got a very, I know you said you're less opinionated than you used to be, which I think we should all be as we grow older.
Yeah.
And part of, getting wise is understanding how little we actually know and being open to new ideas. But today I wanted to talk about, just creativity. And I want to start with a really broad, open question. What is your definition of creativity?
For me, I have a very broad definition of creativity. It's for me, creativity is a big church because it's one of the most fundamental things human beings do. Everyone is born with creativity in them. We solve problems, we fill pages, we write, we do maths. These are all creative acts. And so for me, the narrowing of creativity to a small group of people who own the creative act in any organization makes no sense. What you should be doing is, and what I try to do is look and appreciate everyone's style of creativity and then give them confidence to do more of it themselves. And that might be through code, could be through drawing, but more likely it's through words and interaction and kind of social interaction. Good questions. How do you look at a problem in an interesting way to then exercise your skill set, whatever that happens to be? It could be reading data, it could be designing to solve the problem, to make the world a bit better. And I think, that's, and where I came from, being ad agency side, where you had a creative department. In every business, it was called the creative department. We dealt with the creative bit, and we were treated like, I suppose, like idiot savant children to a degree. It was like,
Okay.
well, because you are allowed to act out as the creative ones. Turns out, if you're creative, you're exactly like everyone else. You just got a much thicker skin for accepting rejection and trying again. So I don't know if that's a good, clear definition, but for me, it's a very, it's something everyone has. It's just the skill we don't feel confident to exercise very often.
So let's dig into that and it does perfectly align with the way I think of creativity. I think every human being is born
Yeah.
as a creative being. We all just need to find the medium through which we can express that creativity. And for some, it's the pencil or the paintbrush. For others, it's Photoshop or Final Cut Pro.
Yeah.
And then for others, as you said, it's data. It's for me, it's doing this podcast. If my life were on the line, I could not draw a human face or a human body. I could draw a great stick figure with a ruler, but I cannot draw anything else to save my life. But ask me to talk and design a conversation. That is my medium of how I like to be creative. And I think what we've done over time is that we've sort of put creativity and creators into this like box, and they are mercurial and they're off in the corner, and their job is to stare at the blank canvas and have that spark of brilliance, of innovation, and then paint onto the canvas, whatever that canvas might be. Like, is creativity a moment of inspiration and brilliance, or can it be something we actually plan for on purpose and design for?
I think it's the latter. You can create a process that supports creativity, more creativity. So a slightly different way. If you think about how the process can allow you to do a little more problem solving, creativity more ideas, or it allows you to do less. It's not just enough that you have the skills to be able to do it. You also need a support structure of people who will listen and not knock you down. So, one of the, I've done some reading about this because it's also my own experience, and I suppose probably the experience of most people who are kind of in inverted commas creative, is that it's a label that you get when you're fairly young, and it's because stuff comes out of your mouth, or that it's flights of fancy, or you're making strange connections, you're spotting patterns someone else doesn't.
Right.
You spend time doing things that other people are not comfortable doing. So, and that would be sitting by yourself, editing a video for fun, because that's like sparks something in your brain. But it's also a label that gets given to people as a way of diminishing them, not on purpose, but it's oh, you're so creative, and that makes you sound childlike. And then you go, oh well, but a real job's like being a doctor or an engineer, or do some maths, and those aren't creative for some strange reason. So we've misused the word massively. I try not to use the word creativity and creative when I talk to my colleagues about making things. I actually try and keep it more in the neutral space, because there's so many triggers. I don't know where you came from. I don't know what your parents said to you. I don't know what an uncle said to you as a joke, and you went, oh, I don't ever want to feel like that again. I don't want to feel ashamed or embarrassed or diminished. So you just stop doing it. And I think that's what we need to get out of people again. We need, we learn not to be creative. We are trained to stop doing it because the feelings associated with it can be really negative. And you probably have a very thick skin and can take rejection. I have a very thick skin. I mean, like, you can't be in advertising and not just take every rejection as a learning experience. But that's a lack of genetics, lack of upbringing, that I turn adversity into energy. Most people, I think, take adversity and they're like, I don't want to do that. That hurts. I'm going to go do something safe.
It's there's sort of a tension there, or maybe a conflict. So on one hand, we're all creative,
Yeah.
and it almost gets programmed out of us from a pretty early age. Where today, people think I'm wildly creative because I look at the world as like a series of Lego blocks. So everywhere I go, whether I'm out with my girlfriend, my brother, my sister, friends, whoever else, they're like, so what are you scanning for right now, Nish? And how are you thinking of like re-architecting what you're seeing in front of you, or connecting it to something you saw like last week or last year?
Yeah.
And I actually wear that label as a badge of honor, because I think creativity is a superpower, especially in a world where we're sort of forced to increasingly be like engaged in commoditized thinking and commoditized output. But you're saying it could almost come off as pejorative, right? Because, as you said, it sort of sounds childlike. So, but we live in a time where creativity, there seems to be a deficit of it almost, where we're relying increasingly on algorithms to tell us what to do. And we see this across all domains of work and life.
We are allowing, well, I mean, to a certain degree, social media apps and everything else, that content is designed very carefully. The algorithm's there to tell you what to do, and we are lazy creatures.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it. You're guilty of it. In fact, there's no guilt to be attached to it. We just are, right? That's just the way it is. The kind of ability, to spark a group of people into rethinking their environment, like you're doing, like looking around and kind of reconfiguring it. I think a lot of people are doing that, but they're not able to or willing to articulate it in a group of people. They don't have a way of getting that out into the world in a um, useful way where the feedback they get is not going to be stop wasting time. So that's the kind of, I think, yes, creativity is more important than ever before. Every business needs it. Like, it was Adobe, McKinsey, Baines, everyone's done a study that shows businesses that are more creative, which basically means they adapt faster, so they learn quickly, they adapt quickly, they find new solutions, which in a volatile world, is exactly what you need to be doing at all levels. You need people who can look critically around them, see what's happening, and then use the skills they have to try and make things a bit better, improve, move with the flow, instead of just getting hit by the bus. And I think that's where we have to catch up. I think that's where the majority of organizations. I mean, I was talking to, yes, it's the big businesses, but it's also like charities. Organizations that have been around for a while, they have institutionalized thinking. They all come with their own language and baggage, and then you go, okay, looking at that, you're all creative. I know it. You just don't believe it yet. How do we then translate these tools into a method that is easy for you to use, or that you're slightly more comfortable using? And a little bit better is one hell of a lot better than nothing. So, that's what we have to do across. I think we have to do that across all of culture. Like, the whole society needs to do that, especially now. But it's a slow build, and I think it's conversations like this. But then also you got to deliver in a way that a large group of people, see works and might tell someone else about.
Right. So we're going to hopscotch all over the place here because,
Okay.
as regular listeners know, I really do this podcast for selfish reasons, which is just to pursue my own curiosity.
Cool.
And there's so many things I want to dig into here. First is, you've said creativity and problem solving 2-3 times now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see creativity as it is the act of solving problems? Or is it storytelling or something else? Or could it be multiple things?
I think the output can be multiple things. So I'll tell you how I feel about brand stories. Okay, so I do like the word story because it's a thing that we're used to remembering. You hear a story, it either touches you, it doesn't, and then you could possibly tell someone else the bones of that story. So the way we set up What Three Words, for instance, is it was with the idea of a story at its core, that everyone in the business could repeat the story. That we had simplified it down into really interesting talking points that you could chat on a couch or at a pub or in a business meeting, that you could feel ownership of that story, that you were part of that tale. And then a good story is something you can repeat again and again and again in all sorts of channels. Now, that story isn't there to keep me entertained. The story is there to help the business achieve its objectives. It's got to get from 0 users to millions of users. It's got to earn revenue. We need to create products that make people's lives better, that improve over time, the usual stuff. That story powers all of that. Gives you the reason why you turn up to work. It explains to your in-laws what your job is. It tells you if a decision you're making on a product feature is right or wrong. Does it fit the story?
A story is an algorithm.
Yeah,
I've been saying,
code, yeah.
Stories are the original algorithms, and humans are the only animal, as far as we know, that have stories as a concept, right? And we've gathered around the literal and figurative campfire for millennia, telling each other stories of the past, the present, most importantly, stories of what the future could be.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that at what three words, that story is deeply embedded. It's everybody in the organization, as you said, can repeat it. And that then ends up getting it's the algorithm through which they translate information and end up making decisions, I would expect. Even developers, right? Like
Yeah.
we have 85 features on the backlog. Which ones matter? The story is one of the algorithms it probably runs through. And then other algorithms like how much time do we have and how many customers have been asking for that and things like that. But
Yeah.
the story is maybe that original algorithm. So I gotta ask, like, what is the what three word story?
Um, so a very simple mission of helping everyone talk about everywhere, which unpacks in a few
Yeah.
different ways. So, um, like I said, the the product was invented by Chris and Mohan, and Chris had this problem, which was he couldn't get. He ran a music business, so it was booking business, and he was always getting asked to go to what can I say, like concert venues or weddings and things like that, and they kept getting lost, and they could never find locations, mostly because bands are going to new places and they're going to badly addressed places, or they're going to large venues with entrances all over the place. So he goes to his friend Mohan. He says, "What could we do with this?" And Mohan is, I think he's chief wrangler in Cambridge. The man is a professor of ancient Norse and number theory. So he very quickly just worked out you could split the world into 3 meter squares and give each one a 3 word code. Everything from there is like making that work. All right, so um, so now I've got this math problem basically. That's what when I came in, the job was to explain what 3 words, and we didn't even know how to explain it ourselves properly. So it's like every 3 meter square has got a 3 word address. They're unique, they're random, and that's part of the code. It's like this mantra of little building blocks that you can expand on, shorten, but mostly copy and paste.
Right.
Then you do things like you work out how do you explain it visually. We invented this thing called a call out. So it's a 3 meter square on the ground with a graphic line and the 3 word address plunked on top of it. One of the important things for us is it's all reality based. Each 3 word address relates to a real place on the planet. So we never show cartoons of the stuff. We never invent stuff. I can't use Gen AI to create images of use cases because they're not true. Like the place isn't true. If you went to that spot, you should be able to look out and see what you're seeing. So it's making those kinds of little decisions then tells I don't know, when you extrapolate that to like the UX design. All right, so that square on the ground, how do you show that visually? Is there a line that goes through to the 3 word address? Yeah, there was for a long time. The tone of voice, all those little building blocks, that's the code. But it's not, that's the story. Like those little pieces that will give you functional benefits and emotional benefits and like just literally how the damn thing works. And then you add on top of that some emotional stuff. So things like brand principles. I don't really believe in rules. So it's like, in general, you want to be relevant, reliable, and spirited. So that gives us an agreed tone of voice for the company. Then we start applying that to TV ads we make with ad agencies in Germany or in India. We apply that to how we make a brochure for emergency services in the US.
But I love the fact that it starts off with like this kernel of a very succinct story that anyone can immediately grok. And it's almost like having that succinct story creates like this, almost like this big bang of then decisions and stories that are all connected back to that origin story. Like all of your stories at what three words and all these decisions and everything that you end up putting out into the world in terms of product branding, whatever else it might be, it all ties back to this original story.
Yeah, and that kind of original story informs the graphic design. like I'm a big fan of I like a small paint box, if that makes sense. So I do little watercolors when I make my cards, and it's like a watercolor box I've had for probably like 15 years now. I don't know how it's still alive, but I scrape it out. But the it's got a limited amount of colors. The I use similar brushes and a similar card format. There's only so many ways you can use the material to achieve a goal, but it's infinite. So it's my imagination is the thing that limits me from being able to express all sorts of ideas through those cards. Same thing you can do with the brand or any organizational story, and it's not limited to the marketing stuff. I think that's the key bit for me. It's like the whole organization's experience, from how suppliers get paid to the attitude of the person who answers the phone. The all those little details all get added up, but they all have to come from an agreed reason why we're here. What are we all trying to achieve? And if you agree with that, and it's easy to use, it's not too hard to remember. It's got to feel quite natural, and you get it right most of the time. Over the years, you build up momentum, build up something you build up a legacy, which is really interesting.
Well, even the way you must be able to like communicate internally and collaborate and just operate at a different sort of level of understanding and then really efficiency and
Yeah.
effectiveness because you're all like operating off that same story algorithm. And it sounds like whether it's a receptionist, procurement, the formal creative team, um, or product development, like even the nerdy developers and technologists, right? Like it's all about how do we manifest and make this story come to life across the entire organization.
I think what's really important is that the story has to be a living story. It needs to be able to adapt to changing circumstances, but also the changing personnel in an organization. Companies are just groups of people, and if something is inflicted on you and you know it's wrong, you're not going to do it. So, so part of my job and the people who kind of think about the brand and the experience around that need to listen. We need to take on new information. We need to adjust. So that like our brand story and has been tweaked every 2 years for the last 10 years. It's a thing that needs to be adjusted, updated, made relevant. Otherwise, it just gets dusty and boring because there's only so many times you can say the same thing as well.
Is that brand story sort of like the origin story?
There is an origin story, but that doesn't help us that tells you how it started, but it doesn't help you make decisions every day.
Okay.
So a brand story or the story of an organization needs to tell you why you're there, but also help you make decisions quickly. That's what it's really about. Can you make fast decisions without being dictated to? So it has to be this way. A good story has enough space for improvisation to improvise.
Yes.
So that gives you then, all right, if you've got space to improvise and you're encouraged to add to the story and it's a living story, then everyone can play.
And God, there's so much to dig into there. So do you actually, is your team the creative team?
No.
Or going back to so your team is the brand team or like
We call it the studio.
the studio?
Um,
So you don't have creatives at What Three Words?
no. And in my the guy I used to work with, Charles Rhys Jones, he was a CMO. I didn't really understand it until I explained it properly, which is he's more creative than most of the designers I'll ever hire. He's an industrial designer and a strategist. So how come they get to be creative and you don't? So there are no one has the label creative, except for me, Chief Creative Officer. But I'm in charge of the creativity of the whole business that's the role I take on. Whether it wasn't given to me, I just take it. And then we have a studio, we have a marketing team, but it's like a blended. It's a blended team. So um, the way I like us to work and the way we do work is basically you go from there's the brief, someone has the brief or a request, they do the brief, then the team gets glued to that, and that'll include um, a marketing manager, design, copy, um, creative operations, and they just take it as a group from beginning to end. And anyone can write the script if they really want to.
So creativity is sort of weaved into the DNA and operating system of What Three Words. And
Yeah.
I was just speaking to Nikki Russell from WDC earlier today. And I've been thinking for a while now that creative operations, especially in this age of AI, its historical and I believe predominantly current role of focusing on efficiency, scale, speed, cost efficiency, um, is probably on the verge of being supplanted by the machines because that's algorithmic work. You know,
Yeah.
how do we scale? How do we go faster? How do we save money? Those are all algorithms. Those are all spreadsheet decisions. And I think there's an opportunity for creative operations to evolve into focusing more on what it seems like you have done at What Three Words is focusing on how do we design for that creative culture. So it's not just, oh, it's a creative team with Photoshop in the corner and we'll just send in a bunch of briefs and requests and they'll send back some pretty pictures and things like that. I'm oversimplifying, obviously, here. But how did you, like, was it you? Was it a decision by the executive team? Like, how did you go about, like, as you said, I'm the chief creative officer, but I just sort of took responsibility for creativity across the business. Um, was that a you thing? Was that a having a discussion with the CMO or the CEO and then just deciding, yeah, creativity's got to be part of our secret sauce?
So when I heard about What Three Words, I thought it was an interesting idea, and I was asked to. They had just got their Series B funding, and they needed to create a bunch of assets. So there was 20 people in the business. I think there were 3 people in the marketing team, and I came in to basically help concept and then deliver a bunch of video assets and all sorts of brochures and stuff like that. But my take on it was, well, we need to have a good story to tell. Like, what are we saying to people? Get that bit straight. Then did a logo, and as we kind of started building out the kind of brand assets and the sales enablement assets, the things that we needed to like go around the world and sell this product, I decided I should be the creative director of the business, which meant I needed to change myself in order to welcome more people in. So I was not. So I needed to be listening to the sales team and hear their stories and see what they needed and how I could have helped them. I needed to listen to the coders and do the marketing stuff. But that head shift it was my head shift, which I then explained afterwards. But I didn't think anyone was going to just let me be the creative director of the company as it grew to like 100 plus. And as we scaled very quickly, it wasn't ever explicit. No one said, hey, you should be the creative director of the whole company. It's like, that's the sane thing to do. If I believe in brand experience, then I need to be paying attention to everything and everyone and give myself responsibility for their output.
Brand isn't just a logo, it's how the company's experienced by everyone internally and externally. It's the DNA of the company.
It is, and so much of it is out of your control. because it's perception of who you are, which I think is brilliant. Like so, um, your brand. There's a great line that says, "Your brand isn't what you say it is; it's what they say it is."
Yes.
And that, I mean, it's something I learned in advertising was you can want to be something really badly. And I've worked with a bunch of clients who really desperately wanted to be seen as purposeful or good for the environment or whatever. And it's like, well, you're fundamentally not, because, well, partly your business won't allow it, but the rest of the world just doesn't believe it. They're looking back in, and what you should be is you should always try and be your best self. That is also helping your objectives. So that's so that people perceive and they go, okay, well, I buy that. That bit's authentic. You're not trying to be someone you're not, and that's how we've set what three words up. Is like, it can't be what it's not. At the end of the day, it's still a weird geolocation tech company that is attempting to change the world for the better. Okay, but I can't control how people see a business, which they go like, I don't know how you make money. You sound weird. You had, like no one would ever use this. Getting over those hurdles, that was years and years of effort. But we've been consistent, and we now have a brand that in this country is recognized by most people. We've got like tens of millions of downloads and like users in this country. And you're like, okay, but this is the best addressed country in the world. So if it's working here, it should be able to work anywhere. But that comes through consistency, kind of telling a good story, and then being really empathetic to how people are going to receive you.
Right.
Just assume that no one is really going to be paying that much attention. Everyone's busy. So you might like this story. So I worked at Ogilvy Toronto, and I remember walking behind a woman with her shopping bags. It was like 5 p.m. She's like going home with her shopping bags, and she was looking incredibly bothered. And I'm like, how on earth what do I show that woman? I get 15 seconds with her that she will remember, and then maybe tell the family of a dinner, and then maybe tell someone after the next day at work. Oh, I saw this thing. It was really entertaining.
Right.
Made me think. And it was around about that time that I was working on Shreddies. Do you know Shreddies? Square cereal?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was at that time that my team and I came up with this idea of diamond Shreddies. So we took a square shreddy and we turned it 45 degrees,
Right.
redid the packaging, launched it like it was a real product. Billboards that said new diamond Shreddies, which just freaked people out. But that story is that woman will tell that story. She had 15 seconds to get it and be like, this broke something in my brain, but it was simple enough to repeat, and I believed it about the product. Partly what we were playing into was it was a Kraft cereals, Kraft Foods, and everyone believed that Kraft would try and upsell you on anything. So there was Canadians are very, I suppose, questioning of big companies. They don't like big companies. They don't like to be sold at, weirdly enough. And so the idea that they were being sold something that was just a square shreddy, they just turned to 45 degrees, kind of upsets like something inside of them. And that was good. But that's my mentality. It's like, imagine the person seeing this for a second. What's going to break through? How many times do I have to say the same thing, and how gentle do I need to be?
Right.
Be a good human being. Kind of helps.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting example of creativity. no canvas was involved, no pencil was involved. It was, we're just going to rotate this thing.
Yeah.
Creativity was born of an understanding of like human nature, Canadian culture, and a few other things. And I imagine it was more than just yourself in the room. There was other people
Absolutely.
that were
Yeah.
contributing to that creative process. Coming back to what three words, you were mentioning that, you know, you're talking about this multidisciplinary team that would come together around a project. Is that the way that things would normally work, or do you feel like you guys are a little bit different? So, do you show up in a product development meeting because you could be creative, not just with the pencil, but in so many ways?
Yeah, so I ended up on like the going to a lot of the app meetings, like helping, so bringing my perspective on how the app was designed, how to improve it, features. Yeah, so we kind of use a broad skill set across the business in order to achieve goals. So like partly because the stuff is quite complicated, and you know, to do a product launch properly, it touches the whole business. But we don't silo it. We don't go, okay, well, this person owns this bit, and then they pass off. There's no passing off. It basically runs concurrently. And the only way that works properly is if you are occasionally in the same room, but you're all paying attention and listening and asking questions as you go along. So it's a thing that's just built as we've gone. I think a good deal of it comes from the CEO, the the CMO that we had. Giles was also like a good listener, like wanted to help. How can we help? Was
Right.
was something that we learned to do. It wasn't something that was just natural to us coming from Adland. Because in Adland, you hold stuff very close to you, and you're protective of it. And then in Techland, you can't hide things. You actually need to constantly reveal what you're doing, so that, if you're a coder and you keep hiding your code, everything crashes. So you review it every day. And so we got into that habit now of on the kind of marketing making side, that we can just work openly as possible, and that also, weirdly enough, gives people confidence that you know what you're doing.
Would you invite a developer into that marketing process, into
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
design process?
Yeah, I mean, I can't help them code anything, but
Right.
I can. What I'm always interested in is listening to where things could be solved with words and pictures.
Okay.
So there's and I think you said it earlier. It's like you don't know what you don't know, so you got to listen. And everyone around the business can teach you little snags that are happening, things that you just have no idea of. So we have a sales team in Vietnam, for instance. Like I really have to listen to them all the time, because things that work in 20 countries may not work in their region at all, just because mothers don't act that way, or that's not the way they go shopping. Like, fine. So yeah, that kind of, it's interesting because you've got to do it yourself. You can't. There's no top down. You should be open. Everyone should work together nicely. People. It's like, doesn't work.
Right.
If you have to do it and show the behavior. Like, you've got to do that over and over again. It takes a long time to learn as well.
How do you do that?
Humility. You learn humility, and you learn to shut up a bit. You have to,
Listen.
got to listen. You got to ask a good question, and you don't have to be right. And so back to the how a story helps me, how the brand story helps me is, I will fight tooth and nail if we step out of that guideline, out of that brand. I will. Then I'll throw my toys out the cart. That's fine. But while we're within there, honestly, there are many right answers. And just because, if it's my choice, I'll make one. If it's the CEO's choice, he can make his. My job is to give him options in order to achieve objectives. But that attitude of, I don't have to be right, I'm not the most creative one here. Like but he's not the most creative one, and she's not the most creative one. We're all in it together. When you're open like that, I think that gives you, and you exhibit that, that gives everyone else confidence to do the same thing.
So, creative culture. I'm hearing some principles come out because I know you don't like rules.
Yeah.
One is like build in public within the company, share your work. Two, be open to feedback. Three, listen, ask questions. It's what else about creating a good cross-company creative culture is important?
No, we kind of sum up a lot of that as no surprises. So if someone is surprised by a piece of work, typically you haven't done enough work up front to bring them into the process. And if their surprise is bad for the project, you really have not done your stakeholder management properly.
Right.
I think what else have we learned? A key one, I suppose, that we figured out in about year 2 was, and every business should have their own way. We just called it the What 3 Words way, which was everyone arrives at a business from some other company or some other institution where they've learned a set of acronyms and structures and processes in order to achieve goals. I think the best thing you can do is when you arrive at What 3 Words now is relax. You don't have to prove you're right. Like your way is the right way. Learn the What 3 Words way. And that is partly because, in design, UX, and marketing, we'll have similar acronyms or similar terms for very different things. So while we are saying the same word, the meaning is very different. Your starting point for a UX designer is very different to one who's not to an art director, which is partly why you end up with these clashes happening. No one's taken the time to understand the other perspective. And so what we tried to do is align all the language into a What 3 Words lexicon, basically. And unfortunately, everyone has to let go of their favorite term. That's fine. But what it does mean is that people who are not quite in your department actually can understand what you're talking about. I had this. I had one of those moments where I had a hard look at myself. A bunch of years ago, at an exit interview, a editor who had been working with us, editor and writer, he said, all the guys who worked at Ogilvy, they're in a little clique. They speak their own language and they have no time for anyone else. And when I heard that, I felt ill because that was not what we were trying to do. And it was because we used language that we were familiar with, but everyone else in the room was missing completely. And we also had this horrible habit of doing the hard sell, which comes from Madland, because you're surprising someone with a piece of work. Now I need to convince you in the meeting why this is what you buy. And getting out of that habit means you need to make sure everyone else in the room understands what you're talking about. Changing words is easy, actually. Your intent is the same. How you describe it and explain it has to change. That helps. That gives you, I suppose the humility to go, okay, I don't have to be the rightest one in the room. But it then helps you understand everyone else's perspective. And I think that makes a good creative culture, because you are constantly learning and getting input and learning how the rest of the business thinks and seeing the problems they're encountering and the solutions they have. So the best thing you can do is when something works in the app UX that I can then apply to a TV ad.
So that's creative culture that you've developed at What Three Words. Is it something that gets talked about, that you spend time thinking about, of what am I going to do this month, this quarter, this year in improving our creative culture? Is it a discussion amongst the executive team?
It was for the first 4 or 5 years amongst a couple of us, but we didn't call it creative culture. It was more about how can we work, and we just disguised it as working better with everyone else. It just happens that some influential characters who are part of the senior management team have creative backgrounds and the methodology that encourages more people to like offer up ideas. So like a thing, you got to walk the walk. So things we've done are, I really believe in this idea of coaching. So we have brand coaching. We don't have creative coaches, we have brand coaches. And their job is to like help. So they may be specialists in design or copy, but their job is to help anyone else who wants to design something, who has made something on Canva. Everyone's got access to Canva, and they can make their own images and whatever they need to do.
Right.
Their own like LinkedIn posts with graphics and all the rest of it, and they put into the Slack channel, and we go, whoever's available helps them make it better, and we'll even go into the Canva file and like help them improve it, so they learn and have the confidence that next time they can just do it themselves.
And brand coaches, is this a full-time role or something that people do?
It's something my head of marketing does. It's something that anyone who's got the confidence to do it can do it. If you know what the answer is, or you feel confident that you can help, jump in.
I love that. Like, that's such a great way of fostering like a creative culture, even if you don't call it that.
Yeah.
For that part of the business,
Yeah.
for like the brand and the marketing part of the business, and how does that show up? Because we are seeing the democratization of being able to produce creative content with tools like Canva and things like that. But I think most organizations, they deploy these tools because what they're after is scale and speed and cost efficiency, and like go-to-market velocity is really what they're after. But I think the brand over time gets diluted, it gets hurt, it starts to like atrophy a little bit, or get Frankenstein really is what happens to it. That's probably the better way of describing it. And I love this idea of brand coaches because it's about working together again, which I think is a big part of a creative culture.
Absolutely. I just love the energy. Like if you want to add to the brand experience and add to the story, you should be encouraged to do that. Like we started. I mean, I was very lucky with What Three Words because you started from like I started from early days, but it hadn't been invented yet. We were in an industry that no one has made a global standard for addressing. It just doesn't exist other than GPS coordinates, which are not they're geolocation, but they're not an addressing system. So it's the first time anyone's done that. You have no idea how the market's going to react, or how to kind of land the first sales, land the first integrations, how people are actually going to interact with it. And so to scale, you need all eyes and ears open, watching what's happening and thinking, that could be improved. That's where we need to spend 10 minutes. Just noticing there's an issue is key. And you only do that if you're curious. Why did that thing happen? Is that something we should spend time on? Hey, what does someone else think? How could we make that? How might we make that better? That's a creative culture for me. It's like one that is engaged and paying attention.
So I want to pivot and talk a bit about AI, because we're in this moment of these AI tools starting to roll out. We're seeing some organizations adopt them, and they're training them on their brand assets and brand guidelines and customer personas and things like that. And they're able to more easily and cost effectively scale content at speed. Which, and this podcast is, primarily focused on creative operations professionals.
Yeah.
And that is long been their remit: scale creative production, do it at speed, do it cost efficiently. Um, but it seems to be that we are like trending towards commoditization of creativity with some of these tools. Um, so let's start there. Like, what's your take on this current AI moment and what you see happening or not happening?
Commoditization of content has been going hell for leather for the last 15 years, and it's just been
In service of the algorithms again.
to feed the algorithm. And I've done my fair share of feeding the algorithm. I think AI gives you that opportunity to like just basically automate something. I still don't know who's looking at all this content, to be fair. So you
The
can,
data says more and more people aren't looking at it.
yeah. So my particular take on the we should make as little as possible. That's my take on this stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, if we make as little as possible with the highest impact, that keeps your budgets under control, and it means you're scaling impact rather than scaling asset numbers,
Yeah.
because asset numbers is easy to do. What's happening with, I think it's quite an odd one. I see. So interestingly enough, What Three Words was a little bit like reluctant to get into it until about 6 months ago. Held back, and then as a business, and we have now suddenly just gone, okay, how can we use these tools? And it's not just on the studio side or market research side; it's coding side. It is plugins. It's What Three Words interacting with how AIs use What Three Words. Like there's a whole load of work happening, and I'm in the bleeding edge of it right now, where we are looking at, can I generate, I don't know, in-app push notifications with the click of a button? And the answer is always yes, one can. Is it a good? Is the thing good? Do you? And the more I'm playing with it, and the more I'm playing with trained versions and training them myself, the more I'm seeing if you train it well, you don't need that much human interaction with it. Partly because when you're doing, I don't know, a test of like 20 scripts, the thing you're testing for is not my subjective taste, because you can't tell what the algorithm wants. Like, so you got to remove your own biases out of it. Not that I'm convinced AIs have got lack of bias.
Right.
Okay, that's the other thing. The most important question right now is that true? I was listening to what's his name? I think one of these AI CEOs. He was asked the question, "Oh, so what do you think teenagers should be studying now? And now that like all their jobs have been taken by AI, what should they be learning?" And he was like, "Critical thinking," because you can't trust what the AIs are giving
Yeah.
you, because they are filling the internet with noise, corruption. It's interesting how our I suppose data corpus is getting corrupted. And I think, sorry, that's a long way around to go back to what do you do with it every day. Use it. For me, it's about using it to build out more time for people to do original work that has the potential of creating greater impact,
Right.
instead of just iterating to death. That's what we should be doing. That's what creative operations is for me. And the time to dream and let your brain loose slightly and then use the tools to like execute, with speed, or execute things that you hadn't been able to do before quickly at a desktop. Great. But there's a massive collapse happening between. Sorry, I'm talking a lot of stuff here, but basically it goes. I see a moment where you go. My brief is like 3 or 4 lines of copy. This is what I think we need to achieve. The AI has got weirdly enough, your story in it, because it seems to react to that kind of coding quite well. Fills in the boxes for you, and you go, yeah, that's about right. And you go hit the generate button, and it's like suddenly you got something to react to. And then the job of the team, whoever works in that business, is now to go, okay, how do we really improve this? How do we push this? How do we achieve impact from this starting point? Instead of that's for me. That's what we have to be doing. I think otherwise we are in a race to the bottom, repeating the same answers over and over again.
Yeah, it's a race to the sea of sameness, right? It's and
Yeah.
you already mentioned this. This is an AI, not an AI thing. We've been on this path for a while now, where it's just we've been commoditizing. Like scale leads to commoditization because, especially in service of the algorithms, we end up copying each other because the algorithms want a certain something. And we do this in our individual personal lives, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I should look a certain way. My hair should be a certain way. I should wear certain clothes. Like everything sort of is trying to encourage us and motivate us and incentivize us to just be like everyone else. And this is also true of companies and marketing. So I think there's value in leveraging AI to, enable impactful scale, not scale for the sake of scale. And I think that's a lot of what's going on right now. And I think the opportunity for creative operations is to embrace AI, or just, let's say, technology writ large,
Yeah.
to take on responsibility for a lot of that administrative or algorithmic operational work. Like, we have to do all these jobs. What resources do we have available, and who should we assign to what? But then free them up to do more of that human thinking, more of that human collaboration and connection, and go, yeah, I don't think these 4 people are going to work well together. We need to change the team dynamics. I don't think AI is there today. It's not going to get that today. It can help in that process, but I think we should be leveraging AI for that algorithmic thinking and freeing up the humans, whether it's creative operations or any other role, for the human work is
Yeah.
what we should be doing.
I got a demo of some software, like kind of AI powered software, a couple of days ago, and weirdly, I didn't say this at the time. I thought of it afterwards. Was that actually I could probably rebuild this whole thing in a day with my limited knowledge of AI tools, workflow management,
Yeah.
knowing that what I want to achieve. And I think like one of the things I've always been good at is delivery. So I know how to go from, I have a thought, to the thing is made and ready to be published. The steps are a thing I'm really good at. And so creative operations is like, I have a foot in that as well. So, but I think what's going to happen is, and I think this is where part of the creative bit of the operations bit is like, okay, what is a creative way of doing this? Like, how do we break this process so it's not causing more of the like the tight control, but more of a loose running. And I think it's hard in big organizations because there's so many people, there's so many restrictions in terms of legalities of what you can and can't do, but you can train the machines to like generally get right. But ideally what you're trying to do is reduce the handoffs. I think we work better as collectives.
Yeah.
You need to be trained how to give feedback and take feedback. And then the way like it's hard to tell how these AI tools are going to develop. I think there's a, but what I'm seeing right now is the most creative people are using them very well, as in they are just being creative with another tool.
They're being creative with another tool, sometimes for output. Some of the most interesting ways in which I see them using it is to, one, help in the ideation process for
Yeah,
like concepting. I've got this, term I use. AI is a creative therapist. Because when we actually go to a therapist, what do we always think about? Sitting on a couch like this, and then the therapist just keeps asking us questions,
mm-hmm.
and then we go, "Why did I just pay them $300 or £300 for that?" It's because we have the answers. So I think using AI, not to prompt it to output something, but to ask it to prompt us, going, "I've got a kernel of an idea, and I need you to help me sort of think through it more broadly, more deeply. I need you to be like kind and nurturing right now because it's a nascent idea. And then maybe later, as the idea develops, I need it to be more devil's advocate, a bit
Yeah.
more brutal in the way it's providing feedback, sort of like that world's worst, you know, critic."
It's the interesting listening to you talk about that. It sounds like it's a process that takes more than a minute
It
or two
is.
minutes. It's
It
like
is.
so.
And this goes back to creative culture. Is like,
Yeah, but there's also discipline for the individual to be able to sit down for 5, 10, 20 minutes and
yes,
just like work an idea. And that is a, I'm, I have definitely noticed that is missing. We are, if it's not, doesn't come easily, it slips away. And like the chewing on the bone, that terminology just doesn't really exist with, I think a younger, not everyone, but I've definitely noticed a slipperiness in terms of the ability to concentrate hard on a problem for a long time, even if it's half an hour, and then finish what you started. There's a very, I've noticed the concepting goes, oh, I've started this thing, I had half an idea, I put it on paper, and then I couldn't do any more. It's like, that's, that's not how it works. That's not how, you know, you spoke about process earlier. Chuck Close paints squares. That's his job. He paints like gigantic paintings or like small pieces, but you know he's doing a pointless approach to painting. And every day he turns up and he just paints colored squares, and then at the end of it, he's got a painting, and then he starts painting more colored squares. It's a job. It's a process. You got to like apply yourself. There's discipline attached to it. And the worry I have is that AI gives you an easy answer
yes.
that looks like a thing, but it's pretty generic and it's not on point. And so back to that idea of composition we were talking about earlier, it's like like how do you then manipulate the building blocks which the AI has perhaps given you to like really achieve the heightened emotion the heightened emotional reaction you need. Communicate that point as hard as you can. Cut through the clutter. That is a human being needing to like really wrestle with it and try many, many different ways. And I think, I'm guilty of being lazy as well, but I think that's the thing we have to fight the hardest right now as makers is the tools make it too easy to go good enough.
It's
And creative operations needs to find a way to get us to have the time to keep bashing at it to be on point.
I think that's where the opportunity is or the risk is. So something that the term I'll use is creative convenience,
Yeah.
and we've seen this play out and I'll use some everyday examples from life. We have food convenience, where we can go and eat as much as we want whenever we want, order food whenever we want. Uber Eats now. And we've seen the health implications it's had. We've seen the implications it's had with like people just eat food on their own for the most part. When you and I were growing up, like food was like something you did with others. Like eating on your own was rare. And now it's the norm. Even watching TV, it's entertainment convenience or just scrolling mindlessly. And you're right. I do think a real risk right now is creative convenience, and I'm starting to see it happen where creative operations people are going, oh, these easy buttons are showing up, and now I can enable that scale to infinite and speed at the speed of light when it comes to creative output. And if that's what they're focused on, then they're not looking at the impact. They're just creating more noise, as you were saying before, and putting it out there. But they've also got to be met with like leadership who's going, it's impact that matters. It's not the easy thing. And the job, I think, of creative operations, and really one of the primary reasons I want to have this conversation with you today and talk about creative culture is I think creative operations needs to start to think of its remit as, whether it's partnering with the creative director or not, but their job is to like help design and foster that creative culture. And it's not just about putting out like marketing content, it's about that organization wide creative culture. And I think, and I'm going to guess for you folks, the way you approach these AI tools and think about them is different because you have that creative culture, and that creative culture is rooted in that origin story. It's, does it serve the story
Yeah.
that we want to live, that we want to tell ourselves and tell to the world?
And experiment. And we have this phrase, ready, fire, aim. So
Yeah.
get it ready, as ready as you can in the time you have, the budget you have. Shoot it out into the world.
See what
Measure
happens.
it,
Yeah.
see what happens, do it, fix, do it again. And and so that's also part of our AI experience is try it, you know, maybe it was a maybe it's a disaster and breaks the brand and you're like, oh, let's not do that again. To your point about this idea of convenience, my head of design did a really interesting thing with his team. So we do monthly newsletters for what three words. They kind of go in things like between 5 and 12 languages, depending on the month. And it took a while to get everyone to do it, but he got the team, instead of like dropping in an image or Googling something or using Gen AI to drop in a photo into the different sections, they have to draw it. Just can be a stick man with the ruler,
Yeah.
the way you do it. Just needs to be a very basic drawing of intent. So it's communicating a thumbnail that communicates an idea. It's the oldest thing in the world.
Yep.
I mean, the pushback from the team at the beginning, because they were like, felt bad about how bad they could draw. It doesn't matter.
They don't want to be judged.
They don't want to be judged, but now it's okay. They had a few practice rounds at it. But what it does is it makes those images so much sharper because they've had time to think about what is going into this and then create an image that fits the composition, rather than here is an image that looks like something, now I have to fit everything else to that. And that inconvenience, friction, purposefully built in, I think is making those designers and copywriters think harder.
Yep.
And create a better newsletter. And it's a small thing, but I think worth doing because, I used to have, I used to have two computers on my desk. I would start saving on my Apple Mac, like a print file. And while that thing was working, I'd go and like tootle around with Flash and making a website. And when that thing was back, I'd roll over and carry on retouching an image. That time doesn't exist anymore. The machines move so quickly. There's no downtime. You can just flip from Figma to Illustrator to Photoshop and then you're into thousands of Chrome tabs, and there's just something always happening. And
Well,
so forcing you to do a bit of technique, which you need to like focus intent into. It's really interesting. I thought it was a really good idea of it.
we have become machine-like in the way we work, and entirely focused on output.
Yeah.
And even like, from like just for creative work itself, like, creative when we think about it, in the way most people think about it, it's we become machine creatives versus whole human creatives, like creating that time and space for like doodling, intuition, just staring at the blank canvas, right?
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, as we've been talking today, and this sort of like amorphous idea of like a creative culture, which you've you've nurtured at what three words, and it's a organization wide thing. And we've talked about some principles and things like that. Um, and with what you just said about and what we're talking about, convenience and friction, I wonder if we need to think about creative culture as something that is designed around the best of human nature: curiosity, creativity, connection, collaboration, culture, cooperation, and designing against what is the worst of human nature, which is path of least resistance. You called it laziness, right? But it's a feature of our how we've evolved, right? It's
Yeah.
energy conservation. So if there's an easy button, we reach for it. But we shouldn't. We should be more mindful, which is why I think purposefully thinking about and having and nurturing a creative culture is important in today's day and age, because these tools of convenience are actually the doorway to commoditization. And commoditization is basically the doorway to your margins and profits are going to zero because you don't matter.
You're easy to clone.
Yes. Yeah. They're easy to clone. So if you were talking to a creative operations leader today and they are stuck in a world of being perceived as project management, the job is scale, speed, cost efficiency, and you've got a creative operations or perhaps multiple creative ops people on your team, how would you encourage creative operations people to think about, like, what is your job moving forward? How do you have a bigger impact on the organization?
First off, you got to share your knowledge about you work. You don't just work in a department. I think that's a really key bit of for anyone is you work in an organization. You have colleagues across the business that need to understand what you do, and you need to understand what they do. And then you can, when you understand their problems, you can probably find ways of solving some of their problems.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many ways to do operations process. It's not. But there will be shortcuts and novel solutions that creative operations has figured out that other parts of the business are going to be needing now, I think, because the means of production has become so much easier, right? So you can move it at a higher speed. So now how do you do that? I think that's something that creative operations can help on. But I think it's people. Like I encourage Laura, my creative operations manager, to know everyone on the team, find time for them to do the things they have to do. But really, I mean, like most of it is my job is to like explain what the value is. And it's funny because I think there's this feeling that businesses don't understand what creativity is about, as in like business leadership. I think they're coming to the pretty damn fast at differentiation and building their little moat to protect their business and keep value in their business is important. They just don't know how to do it very well. So we all just do the thing we're comfortable doing. Creative operations, I think, if you are going to be ambitious in a business, you need to bring these stories up, not in a pushy way, but like here are other ways of thinking about the stuff we do every day. I would say the same thing for studios and marketing teams and UX teams. Break out of your silo. Breaking out of the silos happen because we like to sit at our desks. We like to preserve energy, as you said.
Right.
It's our natural state. And then you stop talking to the people around you, you don't know what they're up to. the people who achieve, I think, the most, and then at the end of it, you have a creative culture, is you get out of your chair, you go and learn. Like my marketing managers are never at their desks. They're always talking to the salespeople, talking with partners, learning, getting out there, being the life of the party to a degree. But they are spreading through the business, being helpful. That's what everyone has to do, I think.
Yeah, I think part of that's also rooted in just going in search of, as you said, understanding other parts of the business. What do people do? What are they struggling with?
Yeah.
Looking for problems and solving them. Because there's so many creative operations people and creative leaders and just creatives in general who are like, sure, I know how to use Photoshop or Final Cut Pro, and I know how to produce these things that are visually compelling and engaging. But at my heart, I'm a problem solver.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they should be oriented towards. And that's maybe a path to creating a creative culture, even before the executive team might, wake up to, we need a creative culture to survive and thrive in this world.
You honestly don't need their permission to
Just do it.
behave in a helpful, curious, problem-solving way.
Yeah.
And if you're working in a place where that hates that, then you need to think about where you're working. But that's the usual for every.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that, why don't we wrap it up? I think that's some good advice for creative operations people that are listening today. Ivan, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for the good discussion. I've enjoyed this one.
All right, we'll have to do it again.